His friend James laughed. Retired. Tell that to the president who called you 3 times last month about the Taiwan situation. Taiwan? Someone gasped. Michael shot James an exasperated look before turning to the stunned gathering. I'd hoped to just be Michael the gardener here. But yes, I served as special ambassador to several regions of interest and still occasionally consult on sensitive matters. He gestured apologetically to the security detail. Standard protocol when handling certain documents. Nothing dramatic. One of the agents, a woman with an expression that could freeze lava, stepped closer to Patricia, who still stood with her accusatory finger outstretched. Ma'am, I'll need you to lower your hand and step back from the ambassador. The other guests stared in amazement as they mentally recalibrated everything they thought they knew about their new neighbor. The quiet man who had been meticulously measuring his grass with a ruler was apparently on first-name terms with world leaders. But he planted unapproved shrubs. Patricia blurted, her voice an octave higher. The senior agent's expression didn't change. Ma'am, I'm not concerned with shrubbery. I'm concerned with your proximity to a former high-value diplomatic asset. His hand moved subtly toward his jacket. Patricia took a stumbling step backward. Part 5. A new understanding. The garden party concluded with Patricia making a hasty retreat, muttering something about checking her records. The Secret Service remained discreetly present until the diplomatic pouch was officially transferred and James departed. Neighbors lingered, suddenly fascinated by the quiet man they'd barely noticed before. Michael woke the next morning to find his property citation-free for the first time in weeks. By afternoon, the neighborhood grapevine was buzzing with increasingly elaborate rumors about his background, some claiming he'd been a spy, others insisting he personally negotiated peace treaties. 3 days later, Michael was pruning his now famous Japanese maple when a sleek Mercedes pulled into his driveway. Patricia emerged, clutching a gift basket and wearing a smile so forced it looked painful. Ambassador Thompson, she began with exaggerated deference. I brought you a small welcome gift. There seems to have been a misunderstanding about your paperwork. She thrust forward the basket, which contained, ironically, a copy of the HOA covenant with a bow on it. All your landscaping modifications have been pre-approved retroactively. The board took a special vote. Michael accepted the basket with a diplomatic smile. That's very kind, but please, just Michael is fine. Patricia lowered her voice conspiratorially. I want you to know that I fully support your government connections. My husband's law firm has several federal contracts, so we're practically colleagues. In fact, we're hosting the mayor next month. Perhaps you'd like to attend. Someone with your connections would be most welcome. Before Michael could respond, the now familiar black Suburban rolled slowly past his house, the driver nodding almost imperceptibly to Michael. Patricia's eyes widened. Are they always watching you? Michael shrugged modestly. Standard procedure for certain former positions. Nothing to worry about. This unauthorized gathering is in direct violation of community standards, she announced loudly enough to silence all conversation. She marched directly to a table when Michael had displayed photographs from his diplomatic career. And what is this? Some kind of unauthorized commercial exhibition? Michael stepped forward, the perfect host despite the interruption. Patricia, what a pleasure. I was hoping you'd join us. I believe you received both my invitation and confirmation of Form 42C approval. He handed her a flute of champagne, which she ignored. My system shows no such approval, she countered, scrolling theatrically through her tablet. And these foreign objects are creating an inappropriate atmosphere inconsistent with our community aesthetic guidelines. One of the HOA board members, a retired judge, spoke up. Actually, Patricia, I personally stamped that approval last Tuesday. I have the carbon copy in my files. Patricia's eyes narrowed dangerously. Well, there's still the matter of these exotic plants. She gestured to a rare orchid, not on our approved list. Actually, Michael responded smoothly. Section 17. Paragraph 6 specifies that temporary decorative elements contained within non-permanent vessels are exempt from vegetation restrictions during approved gatherings. He smiled. I've become quite familiar with the covenant recently. Patricia's face contorted. She'd clearly never encountered someone who'd actually read the entire rulebook. I don't care what loopholes you think you found. This is my neighborhood, she hissed, jabbing a finger toward Michael's chest. I want everyone to leave immediately. I am the authority here. The guests froze in uncomfortable silence, witnessing the naked display of power. Even the board members looked stunned at her outburst. Patricia, please lower your voice, Michael said quietly. You're frightening Mrs. Davidson's grandson. He nodded toward a wide-eyed little boy clutching his grandmother's hand. Don't you dare tell me. Patricia began, but was interrupted by the arrival of a latecomer at the garden gate. Sorry I'm late, Mike, called a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. The secretary wanted to personally review those briefing documents before I delivered them. He carried a leather diplomatic pouch with subtle but unmistakable government seals. Patricia pivoted, sensing fresh prey. And who might you be? James Harrington, Deputy Director of Diplomatic Security Service. The man replied casually, extending his hand. Mike and I go back to the Belgrade crisis. 30 years of service together, isn't that right, Mr. Ambassador? A murmur rippled through the gathering. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Ambassador? Before Michael could respond, everyone's attention shifted to the street as a sleek black Suburban with government plates pulled up, followed by a second identical vehicle. 4 men in dark suits emerged, earpieces visible, and took strategic positions around the property perimeter with practiced efficiency. One approached directly. Ambassador Thompson, sorry for the intrusion. We detected raised voices on the perimeter scan. He glanced pointedly at Patricia. Is there a situation we should be aware of, sir? Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Ambassador? What ambassador? Michael winced slightly. I was rather hoping to avoid all this. I'm retired now. The citation blizzard stopped completely. Every improvement Michael made received instant approval. Patricia began mentioning her close friend, the ambassador, at social functions. At the quarterly HOA meeting, Michael sat quietly in the back row. When Patricia introduced a motion to streamline the approval process for certain distinguished residents, Michael finally spoke up. While I appreciate the sentiment, he said, rising to his feet, I believe all residents deserve equal treatment under HOA regulations. In fact, he continued, pulling out a folder, I've taken the liberty of drafting some proposed revisions that would simplify rules for everyone. The room fell silent as Michael distributed his proposal, a completely reorganized covenant that maintained property standards while eliminating the Byzantine approval processes and arbitrary restrictions. I've found in my career that the best governed communities are those with clear, fair rules applied equally to all, he explained. Selective enforcement breeds resentment, while transparency builds community. One by one, board members, including a notably subdued Patricia, voted to adopt the revisions. 6 months later, Michael hosted another garden party. Attendance had doubled. Even Patricia came, noticeably more relaxed now that enforcing 127 pages of regulations was no longer her daily mission. You know, Frank confided to Michael as they watched children playing safely on lawns that no longer required ruler measurements. Rumors say you faced down warlords and terrorists, but I think getting Patricia Wellington to back down might be your greatest diplomatic achievement. Michael laughed, watching as neighbors of all ages mingled freely, no longer afraid of citation-worthy infractions. The skill is the same whether dealing with dictators or HOA presidents, helping people save face while guiding them toward better solutions. In the distance, a black Suburban remained parked, its occupants vigilant but unobtrusive, a reminder that true authority is exercised with restraint, something the former ambassador had demonstrated not through intimidation, but through respect for the community he now called home. Michael Thompson, a recently retired diplomat in his late 50s, wiped sweat from his brow as he carefully positioned a rare Japanese maple in the freshly dug hole. After decades navigating political minefields in embassy compounds across conflict zones, all he wanted was to create a peaceful garden sanctuary in his new home at Oakwood Estates. The upscale suburban neighborhood, with its manicured lawns and luxury homes, seemed perfect until he heard the unmistakable click-clack of heels marching across pavement. "Excuse me, what exactly do you think you're doing?" Michael looked up to find a woman with immaculately highlighted blonde hair, designer sunglasses perched on her head, and a tablet clutched against her chest like a weapon. Her expression suggested he was committing a cardinal sin rather than planting a tree. "Just adding some landscaping to my new home," he replied with the same calm tone he'd once used to diffuse a standoff with border guards in Eastern Europe. "I'm Michael Thompson, just moved in on Tuesday." The woman's expression didn't soften. "Patricia Wellington, HOA president." She tapped furiously on her tablet. "That tree isn't on our approved floral list, and I don't see any submitted Form 32B for landscape modifications in the system." She looked at him as though he'd just confessed to a felony. "You read the 127-page homeowner's covenant before making modifications, correct?" Michael's diplomatic smile remained fixed as he thought about the 3 steamer trunks of personal items still waiting to be unpacked. "I must have missed that particular detail." Patricia's red lipstick smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, we have standards here at Oakwood Estates. Not just anyone can make it in this neighborhood." Her gaze flicked dismissively to his dirt-covered gardening clothes. "You might want to familiarize yourself with our rules quickly, before you make any more mistakes." As she click-clacked away, Michael's next-door neighbor, an elderly man named Frank, emerged from behind his fence. "I see you've met the Patricia," he chuckled. "Or as everyone calls her when she's out of earshot, Karen Supreme." Frank hobbled over, extending a weathered hand. "Frank Morelli. Been here since before all these rules. Back when you could paint your door whatever color you wanted without submitting 3 forms in triplicate." Michael shook the offered hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Frank. Is she always this intense?" "Oh, that was her being friendly," Frank replied, leaning on his cane. "Wait till she gives you the full welcome package. Last month, she measured the Johnson family's grass with a ruler at 5 am. Called the violation hotline when it was a 1/4 inch too high." Michael raised an eyebrow. Violation hotline. Her own creation. Go straight to her cell phone. Frank gestured toward Michael's Japanese maple. "Beautiful tree, by the way. Shame it'll have to go." Michael looked down at the tree, soil still clinging to its delicate roots. "Actually, I think it might stay. I've found that most regulations, when studied carefully, contain their own exceptions." Frank barked a laugh. "You sound like my son the lawyer. Good luck with that approach." Patricia practically wrote the covenant herself when she moved in 5 years ago. Used to be a corporate compliance officer before she retired to make our lives miserable full-time. Later that evening, as Michael unpacked his books, diplomatic memoirs, and international law volumes that told the story of his career, a sharp knock rattled his front door. Outside stood Patricia, now accompanied by a thin man in an expensive suit who wore an expression of perpetual disappointment. "Mr. Thompson," Patricia said with artificial sweetness, "this is my husband, Howard Wellington, HOA Legal Counsel. We've brought you the complete Oakwood Estates regulatory package." She thrust forward a binder thick enough to stop bullets. "You'll find the landscaping approval forms on page 94. All modifications must be submitted 30 days prior to implementation." Howard cleared his throat. "We've taken the liberty of documenting today's violation with photographs. As you're a new resident, we're issuing only a warning this time." He handed over an official-looking document with a red warranty stamped across the top. Michael accepted the materials with a cordial nod. "Thank you for the welcome materials. I look forward to becoming familiar with the community standards." As they turned to leave, Patricia paused. "Oh, and we'll need your biography for the neighborhood directory. Occupation, previous residence, that sort of thing." "I'll be sure to provide what's appropriate," Michael replied carefully. Howard's eyes narrowed slightly at the diplomatic phrasing, but Patricia was already moving on to her next target, pointing out a wind chime swaying gently on another neighbor's porch. Michael closed the door and set the massive binder on his coffee table next to a small, framed photograph partially obscured by packing material. Michael shaking hands with a former president in the Oval Office, Secret Service agents standing discreetly in the background. He smiled slightly. In 30 years of diplomatic service, he'd negotiated with dictators, warlords, and terrorist intermediaries. Patricia Wellington would be an interesting new challenge. Michael's doorbell rang at precisely 7:15 a.m. on Saturday. Outside stood Patricia, her phone camera already recording as she narrated, documenting violation number 8, unapproved window treatments visible from street view. She thrust a pink citation paper into his hand before he could even offer a morning greeting. This was the 4th violation notice this week alone. His transgression collection now included garbage bins visible for 17 minutes past the permitted time, photographed with timestamp, garden hose chaotically coiled rather than using an approved hose storage solution, mulch in chestnut brown rather than the mandatory oakwood russet, and his latest crime, cream-colored curtains visible through front windows instead of the required neutrals in the ecru family. That afternoon, Michael was meticulously measuring the precise 5.25-inch grass height, no more, no less, according to Section 17 of the Covenant, when a moving truck rumbled past. He watched as a family loaded their final boxes, the parents looking defeated. The Alvarezes, said Frank, appearing at the fence again. 4th family to leave this year. Lasted 8 months, longer than most. Frank leaned closer. Patricia runs this place like her personal fiefdom. Takes special interest in educating new residents. He made air quotes with his fingers. She's got the board wrapped around her finger. And her husband's law firm handles all HOA legal matters. Convenient, right? Michael raised an eyebrow. How many citations before she moved on to another target? Oh, she never moves on. Frank chuckled darkly. The Richardsons got 147 citations in 6 months before they broke their lease. Patricia keeps a scoreboard in her home office. Perchie even has a celebration when she successfully drags someone out. Michael's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, the same look that once made foreign officials nervous across negotiating tables. Interesting. I've dealt with territorial disputes before, just usually involving actual territories. That evening, Michael sat at his desk, methodically organizing each citation in a leather portfolio, cross-referencing each with the actual HOA guidelines. His phone buzzed, a text message alert from his security system showing Patricia in his side yard, photographing his garden lighting with a disapproving frown. He smiled slightly. During his career, he'd outmaneuvered warlords and dictators. Perhaps retirement wasn't going to be quite as boring as he feared. Are you sure about this garden party? Frank asked, eyeing the engraved invitations Michael had hand-delivered throughout the neighborhood. Patricia once called the police on the Johnsons' graduation celebration because their balloons were non-regulation colors. Michael smiled as he arranged imported cheeses on an antique silver platter he'd received from a grateful prime minister years ago. I've submitted Form 42C. Neighborhood gathering application with all required supporting documentation. I've even included noise level projections and a diagram of guest parking arrangements. Everything is precisely by the book. What he didn't mention was his strategic guest list, carefully cultivated to include the 3 HOA board members who occasionally showed independent thought, plus 4 neighbors who'd received the most citations after his own record-setting count. The afternoon of the party arrived with perfect weather. Michael's garden had been transformed with subtle lighting, classical music from hidden speakers, and displays of artifacts from his global travels, each one with a fascinating story. Guests mingled, clearly enjoying the sophisticated atmosphere so different from typical neighborhood barbecues. Michael was in the middle of describing a close encounter with pirates off the Somali coast to an enthralled group when the gate swung open with such force it bounced against the fence. Patricia stormed in, her face flushed with righteous indignation, phone already recording.